All right, quick mic check. Check, check. Make sure this. And these guys are making sounds. I don't actually know if I hear these guys. Let's see. Huh. Yeah, that's where the sound in the game's not working. I wonder why that is. Make sure this is. Soundflower. Something with that. Yeah, I wonder why that you can't hear the game sound. I don't know if it's necessarily super important we hear game sound. All right, we'll worry about this later. I'm gonna go ahead and get started. You can hear me talking. That's good. I'm gonna mute my thing here now and keep that on. Okay, and then let's fire this up so I can hear Discord in the background. All right. Hopefully all goes smooth today. It's always fun dealing with the tech challenges of getting this thing set up. All right, I'm ready for my signature intro. Let's get my page up here. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ross Shabilsky. I am the founder of D20 Studios. We are an indie game studio based in the beautiful Salt Lake City, Utah, and it is a lovely spring day today. Sun is shining through the mountains. Absolutely beautiful morning having coffee with my wife today on the porch. And kids are at school, house is empty, and I am ready to get to work. And I am developing a game here called Summoner's Fate. It is a combination of a tactical grid-based battle RPG meets deck builder. It's really exciting. We've got a full single-player campaign experience planned, as well as PvP multiplayer and all kinds of various exciting game modes. Been working on this full time now for the last 3 years. Can't believe it's been that long. But we are nearing the end of our journey here. I've got most of the infrastructure in place, and current priority is getting the single player working. But before that can be completed, I've got some tool updates to make that are necessary for being able to develop the various components of what will be going into our procedurally generated single player experience. So the game is currently available in pre-release. We have been testing and playtesting with users now for since the beginning of this actually. And recently we launched the public pre-release earlier this year in January. One of the staples of my studio is player-driven, community-driven design, which means that I work one-on-one with our players directly in our Discord and our forums via email, however you like to communicate, in gathering your feedback, ideas for new cards, changes to the gameplay mechanics, and I take all of this very seriously. There's not a single piece of feedback I haven't recorded somewhere in my various logs, and even if it takes weeks or months for me to get back and address it, I do address all player feedback at some point, and those that are already part of the experience can vouch for that in our Discord. So I encourage you to check that out. All of our various community links are here on our webpage, summonersfate.com. We've got these handy URLs at the top that'll let you get into our Discord and things like that. The game can be purchased now in pre-release. It's available on PC and Mac for download. We also have our mobile versions, Android and iOS, available. When you purchase the pre-release, you get access to our test flight or Google Play beta, so you can play the game on all four platforms. And what's currently included is we've got the game's intro tutorial experience, unlimited battles versus the AI and other players, deck buildings in the game, and very soon I'll be introducing the single player campaign where you'll be able to play the endless missions. It's kind of like a rogue-like exploration where you continuously develop your characters by collecting new cards for your deck and building stronger decks as you play. Um, Originally, we were going to be a freemium game, but we've since switched to a premium model because we feel it's best for the player experience. So you get access to all the cards and content available immediately when you get the game. And we are adding new content every week here on our Twitch development stream. So it's one of the exciting things about the game is there's continuously new content and things to explore. And yeah, so check it out. These are all of our, we got all kinds of cool awards and more info about the game and our cool features here. All right, but this stream is about development, and so I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about what we'll be working on today as I develop this game. So last week here on the stream, I was attempting to complete a very critical point in our tool set where I am attempting to consolidate the various definitions that control all the game's content. Sorry, my cat is meowing incessantly for some reason. I don't know why. What's the matter? Why are you meowing so much? I don't know if you guys could hear it or not. It's constant meowing. All right. Anyway, so I had been attempting to create an ability. I should probably talk and show this to new viewers as we're going through this here real quick. All right. So this is the development tool I use to produce the game. It is the D20 Studio Definitions Editor. So some background on this. In addition to building just the Summoner's Fate, I'm actually working on 3 games. If you can, I could probably segment it that way. It's the single player game, the multiplayer game, which are 2 vastly different experiences, and then the tool set that I use to develop the game with. And it's critical to have these tools because my intent for this game is not to just release it and forget about it, but I want to continuously service this game and have a thriving community that's behind it and enjoying this thing for the next 10, 20 years. I mean, this is more than a game. This is a full-on hobby. I want you guys excited. This is going to be the game your go-to game for this kind of experience. So this is our definitions tool. This particular module is the map level editor where I do all the testing and level creation. You can actually play the game inside the editor. So I can shoot skeletons and they shoot me back, and it's all kind of fun there. And all the other types of things in the game as well, like our units and our cards. So you can create all the different characters and playtest the animations and basically build all the content. And this is what I've been using on the streams week to week to build new cards to the game and then introduce them via DLC for you. Anyway, so last week I was attempting to consolidate a major scalability problem that I discovered as I was going to start the creation of the single player experience. So single player is going to have all kinds of dynamically created or procedurally generated is another word for it, encounters and things to guarantee that every time you play you're going to have this unique experience. And that will involve spawning enemies into rooms, assembling full-on dungeons, and the world itself. And I realized as I was developing the cards and the content on the stream that I was coming across this scalability problem where I've got pieces of what define the content scattered across various tables. So you've got things like the units, which are the characters. You've got the maps, which are the levels. But then more specifically, when it comes to the abilities, we've got things like the status effects that then can house triggered abilities. And then the triggered abilities have things that link back to other stuff. And basically what it was doing was creating a vastly exponentially growing spider web of confusion that was making it very difficult to manage all the content effectively and creating lots of potential security risks. And I say security in terms of keeping the code stable, not like a hacker threat per se. It's more of a when I have lots of loose pieces all over the place, there's a high risk that I could accidentally delete something that's crucial to the operation of various things. So it's this constant battle from a programmer about the creation of global content and then encapsulating content in a nice, clean package, if you will. And we did the long, kind of hard, and not so fun process of renaming everything so I can condense the data down to the smallest possible footprint. I talked last week about how I want to have data packages very small so that the user experience to download and get updates is very fast and fluid. And when I say fast, I mean a DLC update for our game with an expansion of new cards and content is, seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. It's not a 2 hour, half hour, or whatever download you might see when you update, major AAA games because of how I've developed this tech pipeline. Anyway, that last week's stream ended in abysmal failure. Yes, it wasn't necessarily pleasant. I don't like to have my streams end in failure. But as I said last week, I don't rehearse these things. I don't stage everything. I just sort of, create an agenda of work for the day like I always do, and then I hope that it's going to all turn out great and I look awesome when I program this stuff for you guys. But I can't predict the success because it's all new things I've never done before. And so last week we had attempted, after we had finished the whole system, to try and recreate a spell. I believe it was the counter spell we were trying to make, and yeah, it wasn't happening, and I had to I had to end it. So since that time, I have done some debugging, and I want to first off say I'm grateful for you guys being here with me and giving me the opportunity to showcase this live, because that failure is actually one of the best teachers when it comes to development. And it showed me, as I investigated the reasons why I failed, that there were lots of things I could be doing better with the system I had created. And as a result of that failure, I have now created a far better system. And I am very excited to show that off for you today. So we're going to resume the work today with attempting to do what we did last week, which is create the counterspell within the new data format. Okay. So let's go ahead and show you guys what a counterspell is. So if you're familiar with games like Magic the Gathering or Hearthstone, I believe every type of CCG has got something like this, and of course we want to have that in our game too. So Counterspell is a card you can play that will counter the next enemy spell that is cast. And since our game does not have any kind of notion of like real-time interrupts like a Magic was, this happens in the form of a trigger. So we've got this surprise mechanic where when you play this card, it's concealed to the opponent, and then its effect triggers when the condition's met. So essentially, you're going to play this card on your turn, and then the next time an opponent casts a card in their turn, it will counter their spell. Now, they won't know what spell you've cast. They'll simply know that you placed a surprise on the board, and then when the trigger's met, it will fire this event. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and show how this spell works in the game, and then I'm going to kind of talk to how we're going to rebuild this spell in the new model. All right, so here we go. Boom, go into the grassy path test here, and I need to queue up the right test deck. So let's go to redirect test. I think it's got a counterspell in it. Okay. So here I am. I'm battling a bunch of AI guys, and I have normally what happens. Let's just pretend I'm playing as the AI. They're going to cast a fireball on me and attempt to blow me up. Boom, and it burns all the ground and kills my poor archer there. I didn't like that. So that's how a regular spell sequence would work. What I'm going to do now is put a counter spell. I'll put that on the doesn't matter who I put on. It's basically whatever unit it's on will be the one that triggers it. So you see now I've got a little status effect there, and on the character it'll say counters next enemy spell. So another player on the other end would have saw a mystery question mark surprise played, and they wouldn't necessarily know who I cast on, what the card was, just that there's some kind of hidden thing I did. But let's say on their turn now they go to cast that fireball again, and here's what's going to happen. I'm going to burn you. Nope. Blocked. Counterspell. And you see that the counterspell triggered, it removed itself, and it stopped that fireball from happening. That's what the counterspell does. All right, so now let's look at how that counterspell is currently configured in the definitions editor here, where I build the content, and then we're going to talk about how we're going to fix it and make it far better for development going forward. So when I go to my spells, we're going to go ahead and look at that spell here. And so this is where I define all the various aspects of that card, its art, its icon. So you can see here I can flip and change all the icons. I've got all this art loads dynamically from our asset list. One of the cool things about this tool is how it sort of self-edits and evolves itself. The more art you drop in it, it automatically updates these drop downs. And then all of its abilities are here. So let's talk about its ability. It has an action effect where it's going to apply a status effect, which is that one you saw on the archer that looks like this little symbol. That says surprise counterspell on target. Okay, so what is that doing here? Well, now I've got to go to the status effect table and find that surprise, which is somewhere down here, and surprise counterspell. There it is. Okay, so counterspell. Here's the status effect, and we can see here it's a surprise. It's got its description. Here's what it's configured to look like, and then that has a triggered ability. Okay, called surprise counterspell on preemptive. All right, so now I got to go to my triggered abilities and find that counterspell. Where is it? Surprise. Counterspell and preemptive. Okay, then this is what actually does the magic of countering it here. You can see this is going to listen for an event called preemptive, which fires when someone casts a spell before it goes to the resolution step. So basically, it's like I'm putting a card onto the stack, and then it's going to respond to that trigger. It's going to listen for some conditions to make sure that these various things are met. Like it's only going to try to counter spells, not other abilities. It won't counter spells that have already been countered. It won't counter my own spells, etc. And then it's going to set the attribute to countered and then remove itself from the game since it's been used. Okay, so you can kind of see following that chain of events why this is a rather verbose and complex scalability problem, because this one spell has now got its feelers into 3 different tables of content rather than being nicely encapsulated in itself. And a lot of these spells are far more complex than the counterspell, and some of these have multiple sets of triggered abilities or effects they create. And what this does is it bloats this long table of triggered abilities here where, a couple hundred cards can easily turn into 600-700 different triggered abilities, and that just gets bigger and bigger as I add more content. So I am very scared of trying to manage that as we get the final set of cards completed and as I continue to build expansions in the future. And that's why I had to put the brakes on the single player and say, you know what, I've got to fix this tool problem before it gets out of hand. Um, and those decisions are not always easy to make. I like to just keep making stuff, but sometimes you have to make these calls for the good of the long-term future. All right, so what we had attempted to do last time was basically condense all this data into the counterspell itself. And it failed because of how I was actually going about the process of encoding the data. So essentially right now, all these different pieces are all stored in like a SQLite style database, and they're all separate and isolated. But I wanted the ability to create definitions within definitions. And last week I sort of joked about the dream within a dream, like the inception, right? And that's kind of what we're going to be doing here. But the challenge is I needed a way to ensure that the definitions could properly read the encoding and condense it back into a format that's really, really small, and then expand that into a meaningful piece of code logic. So another way of describing what I'm doing here is essentially this editor is in itself a type of new programming language I've created. A really simple scripting language. I've got a data structure, and then my runtime code interprets it. And this basically allows me to create new content that's effectively coded, scripting, but it's all within the policy of being able to do via DLC, because it's not actually creating any executable code. It doesn't put any kind of computers or data at risk. So that's what's really awesome about having content built this way. All right, so we're going to go back and kind of reverse our steps and attempt to condense all of that stuff down into a singular table. So the first thing I need to do is go into status effects, and I'm going to go to counterspell again. And here we go. So the new piece of the tool I've created here, normally these drop downs all reference the other table. So you can see here, this is sort of like a drop down that mimics that long scrolling list of triggered abilities I had before. And normally what these things do is just sort of map data from one table to another. The new piece I've added is sort of the best of both worlds. It allows me to not only reference existing global things, but also create new things on the fly and store it directly here as raw data. All right, so by doing this, I can hit edit, okay? And I'm going to just make a change to this thing so that the save button lights up. And then I'm going to go ahead and now hit, if I go give this whole thing a new name, we're going to say counterspell on preemptive. Okay, that's what the trigger actually is. And then I'm going to hit save, okay? And you're going to see what just happened here is that this now changed to a nested, all right? That's telling me that this definition is no longer stored in the global list. It's now basically copied all that data, and it's storing it all directly here within this particular table, right? And so what does that data look like? Well, I've got this little handy tool that can show us right here. All right, so we're going to take and copy this, and you're going to see some interesting things. So believe it or not, that is what a counterspell looks like. I know. Isn't that exciting? It's a bunch of zeros and ones and various pieces of information. Now, last week we had worked on condensing some of the names to make this as small as possible. Basically, as small as I can make these chunks of data, the better for you, because it's less download time, less file space on your device. This is really, really small and condensed. And what I've basically done here is created a new type of formatting. I suppose it's probably similar to a JSON structure, and then I've basically reconfigured. In the past, what I had been doing was creating unique types of encoding using different characters, and that was the reason why the transfer failed last week, is because I had this really complex, goofy series of encoding that just was not itself scalable because it required me to create a new type of encoding for every nested level. What I've done here is basically use these brackets or these braces to define encapsulation within the encapsulation. So you can see here, like sort of like there's these main roots. If I paste this out, so here's the belly of that effect. And then we've got the various properties, right? So you can see things like here's the animation cast, and this corresponds here to the where was that thing here? Oh, right down here. The cast animation down there. The recovery animation right there on the edge there. Okay, so you can see that's just encoded as a string. And then we got the sound effect for it. We've got the now we've got things like the what's the ST is the secondary targets, and then there should be a primary target, I think. Let's see. Yeah, secondary target, and then there should be a PT as well. Where's that PT? Yeah, here it is, PT. That's the primary targets. And you see these have some encoding as well. So that's got another nested piece here that's saying here's the secondary targets. The M stands for the method. 30 corresponds to the ID of the targeting method, and so forth. And then these little pieces here represent the C is the condition. So these are the conditions of the targeting. And these are all just encoded as ID numbers that correspond to the various settings for the conditions. And those all reference back to other tables and definitions so that this can be all reused and be as light and, fluffy as possible. Fluffy is probably not the right word. Light is the better word. Light and condensed as possible. I guess we want condensed, not fluffy. Fluffy seems to term bigger. It's not really. It's meant to be small. Okay. But what's cool about this braces structure is that now I can embed infinite layers of nestability by just using these braces. And then basically what I did was I wrote a encoder decoder that knows how to interpret this thing and recursively go through it without trying to break these different things. So the key components of it, though, are the braces indicate the structured object. These colons represent the separation of the property name and the data that's attached to it. And the comma represents the separation of the various properties within it. So the way it decodes is it first separates the brackets, then it finds the property, then it separates all the things by the commas and creates a little array list. And then it breaks apart the property and data using the colons here. Okay, and this whole pattern can be used infinitely recursively within itself without having to worry about the problem I had earlier. So that was the awesome piece from last week I discovered. By having that failure, I realized that the path I was on was totally wrong, and I was able to stop in my tracks and go, you know what, I need to rethink this, and was able to come to this much better, much more elegant solution that will get us to where we need to be. Okay, so there's kind of the explanation of that. I'm going to go back now and hit save. Okay, boom. All right, so now the counterspell status has completely encapsulated this triggered ability for counterspell on preemptive. So now we can go back and go to the triggered abilities table and watch how we're going to start saving our data here. We can now get rid of this old surprise counterspell and preemptive. We no longer need this to exist here because it is entirely encapsulated within that status effect definition. So I'm going to delete it. You know what? Before I delete it, though, I'm just going to make sure I copy a backup because in case I did something wrong, I have a fallback. Okay. So there we go. Let's delete that. Goodbye. And then we're going to go to the status effects now. Okay, and we're going to go back to that surprise or counterspell. Here it is. All right, and now I'm going to hit this get button and copy the string here. And that's going to give us the entire counterspell encapsulation. All right, and now we're going to go back to the spells, and we're going to go back to counterspell. All right, now I've got this new thing down here called nested status effects. This basically allows me to place status effects within the card itself. All right, so I don't have to reference back to that other table. I can have my own list here. And I can go to edit, and I'm just going to go in here and paste in that data string and hit load. And you can see here it loaded in that data, it loaded in the trigger, and this is where we failed last week, by the way. But because of the new nesting structure, it happily works together. And I can say here I'm going to call this guy counterspell status. Okay, I'm going to hit save. All right, so now we have got counterspell stored within the counterspell. I'm going to hit save again just to keep our progress going here. And then, let me see here. Counter the next enemy spell cast. Counter next enemy spell cast. Counter next enemy spell. You know what? We're gonna have a little fun with this. I'm gonna try and reuse some of the wording here. All right. So the other thing I need to do is change the supply stat spec. Right now it's still referencing the one that's stored in the global stat specs table. So what I'm gonna do here is change this to our new ability called apply stat spec custom, which would be these nested here. I guess nested might be a better word. And then this just has a list drop downs. We're going to use the first one, the list, which is 0, which is this guy, and hit save. Okay, so now we have completely decoupled this spell from any global references entirely. And I'm going to do some other fun things here because I like to have a correspondence between the effect and the spell and minimize the language use. So I'm going to put subtype here. Oops. Okay, so now you can see that subtype converted to that. Yep, that kind of corresponded to that. So I'm going to hit save here. I'm going to go into here. I'm going to say counter the next enemy spell. Counter the next enemy spell. Hit save. Okay. Go back in here. All right. Surprise. And then I'm going to delete this text. There we go. Surprise. Counter the next enemy spell. All right. So now it's what I just did there was I created a relationship between the status effect, which has its own text, and put that in the description here, and it's deriving the subtype from here because the definition knows that the spell is attached in this action effect, and so it's able to pull its description of that subtype and then put it directly into the card text here. All right, now I'm going to do another cool thing. This is another piece I've been working on because I realized when I did all these nest effects, one of the long-term goals I have for this game is that I want it to be a worldwide sensation, right? So we need to have this game localized into languages across the world so that folks that don't necessarily read English can still play and enjoy the game in their native language. And so what I've done for that end is created this really cool thing where I can go into here and we're going to create. So normally I just store all descriptions directly in the definition as English text. What I'm going to do now is go ahead and hit this plus button. And what this is going to do is create a localization key that's been now linked to this particular spell with a unique identifier, and then it has its own unique localization ID. All right, so now this spell or stat spec no longer has text stored in it. It has an ID that references the localization. I'm going to hit save on that. And then we're going to go ahead and do the same thing on this guy here, and then hit save. All right. So what happens with these localization keys? Why did I do that instead of just storing it as English text? Well, the problem with this nested structure is that it kind of hides the different pieces of localization that we need and makes it really difficult to find and then test all these things. And one of the biggest costs associated with translation is not even the translation itself, but the testing of that translation to make sure that the characters appear correctly in the game engine, that they're fitting on the card, that they're not too small, that they're readable, all these various things. And with all these nested structures and having those things buried, it makes it really hard to find, discover, and test all those different components. And you're talking about hundreds of cards and then different effects and statuses that all link to those. How are you going to test something that verbose in a game? And that's why I've created this localization system. So check this out. This is really cool. What this essentially did was link these pieces of text to a new table I've created here called localization. And now you can see that I've got these various where's that counterspell at? Ah, here's counterspell. So here's the counterspell languages and stuff. All right, so you can see here what this has done is created, and I have a little test here at the top, but the idea would be that we've got English text, hello world, and then we've got a translated text in all these various languages. So Dutch, French, Portuguese, Russian, etc., and all the unique characters associated with it. Now, this part of the tool isn't done yet, but I'll kind of explain what's going to happen here. What I've done is have it so that this piece basically has now created a flat spreadsheet of all the things in the game that need to be localized in one common place. This makes it really easy to now figure out all the places you have to test. And I can easily import and export this to a spreadsheet. It tracks when the changes were made and what version the text is on, so that if I'm working with a localization partner, I can communicate the various versions or changes of spells, and you can even track whether it's been, decommissioned, is no longer used, if it's ready for translation, or if it's been approved and is now translate complete. The other important part, though, is that as you create these, it's going to naturally store this context to it. So these all have a context that's referenced based on where it was created. So in this case, it was created in the def spells table. And by virtue of it being created in these places, it can now reference back. And what I'll eventually do is basically create a preview window here where it will recreate that game context. So if the Loc team needs to preview the translation on the actual card, it would be showing the card here along with the translated text, so they can actually make sure that all the translation works in the game engine correctly without having to worry about how they're going to go in the game and pull that card up and test it. Like this saves so much time, and it's a really awesome way to accelerate and make the localization process much more efficient and cost effective for a small studio like me that does not have the tens of thousands of dollars normally required to do this kind of work. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about that, because this is definitely something I want to have, is localization for our players around the world, and this is going to be the way we get there. So now our next step is to we're going to go do some cleanup. I'm going to remove that old counter spell status that we had before, because we should no longer need it. Surprise counter spell. Yep. Okay, so we're going to get rid of that. So we now have all of the counterspell logic completely stored within the counterspell itself. And our last step is to go and verify that it in fact still works. So here we go. Maps, grassy path. I go to my testing, and I'm going to start the game. Okay, and we're going to put our counterspell on our character. So far, so good. I can see counter the next enemy spell. Good, and the symbol's there, and let's make sure it works still. Boom! Counterspell. There it is. Success. So we went ahead and made something that was work again, but in a new and better way. So from the failures of last week, we arise now triumphant and successful, and the nested system is working, and I'm so happy about this, because in the long-term grand scheme of things, it's going to make the data smaller, faster download for you. It now supports localization so that we can translate into various languages, and it's also going to vastly improve the speed at which we can create new content going forward, because instead of having to navigate meticulously through 3 tables or more to string together the various logic needed to make the ability work, we can now do it all inline directly within the card itself. So I'm very excited about that, and I hope you are too. It's a real nerdy developer thing, I get it, but it's man, I'm excited. I'm excited as an engineer about this. I'm excited as a producer about this, as a game designer about this. It's a breakthrough of development elegance, and part of what motivates me and what I like about doing the work I do is finding ways to do the work better, cleaner, and maybe one day I'll take and share this with other developers, and we'll create a new methodology going forward that helps more and more people make games more effectively. So I'm excited about that. Okay, so that takes care of our failure from last week and puts us back on track with development. And now I'm gonna try and take and use this new method. My next plan is to finish one of the cards we had worked on a few weeks ago before I had headed off to PAX East. And then I'm going to attempt to do some new coding and add in some abilities for the engine to handle some of the cards that we had tried creating on previous streams, but I had failed to do so because the engine did not support recursion of itself. And we'll get to that in a moment. But the next card I want to work on, I'm going to pull up the my Google thing here. And let's see here. To develop with Ross. Okay. All right, so here's some of the cards I had worked on before. And the one we had started but not finished yet was this one called Wall of Fire. And it is a spell that basically sets the board on fire and causes a fire to happen, and units take damage on the board. So we're going to attempt to create and finish this spell next. So let us go to our definition editor once more and go and find that fun spell. And then we're going to reconstruct it in the new model and then continue to finish it. So where were we at here? Wall of fire. Here it is. Okay. And you can see here what this is doing is it is applying status effect firewall, and then it's also looks like it's burning the ground around the target area as well. Looks like it targets spaces, not characters, and specifically it's targeting, let me see, primary target type visible. I thought we had created a new type of targeting for this thing that was target wall or something like that, and now I'm not seeing that, so I'm not quite sure how this thing is doing its magic here. We're going to have to test and figure out. I forget where we left off. I thought we had created a new logic method where it would create the fire in a big line. So we're going to take a look and see if I can figure out how this works again. Let's see. First, I'm going to go ahead and edit, embed this status effect within the spell itself. So we're going to go find that status effect because we don't want to have these lingering status effects anymore. And I'm going to find the firewall. Here it is. Okay. Okay, so it looks like we had a fire damage on walk space, and this was set to a 2. Okay, and yeah, okay. Let's go ahead and edit this. Deal damage to fire to units entering the space, deal the fire damage. Okay, cool. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hit space on this and then hit delete. Green Blade YT has joined the stream. Hey, hey to you. Welcome to the D20 Studios Develop with Ross stream where I develop games live for folks and also create new content for our upcoming title Summoner's Fate. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today. Thanks, says Green. You are welcome. We had just finished showcasing the new feature of my editor tool that allows the creation of nested definitions. This was the thing we had failed to create last week, and right now I'm in the process of creating a new card for the game called Firewall. It's going to allow us to set the board on fire and make a nice pillar of fire, basically. So I am taking the existing status effect and we're configuring it in our new nested model, so I can kind of encapsulate all the logic for this card into the card itself, versus have its guts scattered across the, 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 the database, I guess. All right, fire damage on walk space. Okay, great. Let's save that. So now this is a nested ability, and it no longer has any dependencies. So I'm going to hit save on that, and I'm going to go ahead. And Green Blade asks, "You've made this tool yourself?" Yes, yes, I have. This has been a 3-year in the making process. I started working full time after I left EA. Almost 3 years. It'll be 3 years officially next month. And yeah, I like to joke I make 3 games: the single player game, the multiplayer game, and this. And he asked, in what language is this programmed in? So the definitions editor tool, this is all programmed in ActionScript, and it's compiled as a Air desktop application. And this tool allows me to create everything content-wise within the game. So sometimes people joke like, "What engine is the game in?" And I'd like to now say it's in the D20 engine because technically it is. Everything that runs the game's logic and content, from the levels to the game logic to the VFX, the characters, is all done via our custom editor. Yeah, ew, ActionScript. Yeah, Flash is sort of I know I don't like to use the word Flash anymore because it just creates sad. I'm a C++ dev. Excellent, yeah. Um, it's got a kind of a bad rep now, so I like to say that as much as I used to. But it's actually a really good, strong object-oriented language. And the funny thing I found about programming over the years, over the many years I've been, I think it's been over 20 years now since I've been coding. Um, it doesn't matter what language you use. What matters is that you understand the solid principles of how to do the object-oriented logic and solve the algorithms that are a challenge regardless of whatever language you're in. And yeah, effectively, I had kind of described earlier that when I'm creating a tool like this, what I'm actually doing is creating my own language. So I don't program in ActionScript so much. Well, to make this I do, but to program the game, I now program in my own game logic that the engine interprets and does all the magic it does to make the logic work. So that's the beauty of this, is that you can take and use this to make anything. So and I use various other languages as well. So ActionScript for the client-based software. I do C# for the server code. I do PHP for a lot of the web services that connect to the game, like our forums and login authentication, things like that. So there's a lot of different pieces involved. And while they all have their differences in the syntax, it's all about understanding just how the logic works. As long as you've got Google and you can look up the syntax docs and you know how to program, you can program in any language, which is fun. So Green says, so you've made your own language plus compiler within this engine, which is made in ActionScript. Within this engine, which is made in ActionScript. I suppose that's a good way to put it. I guess I would describe what I've created here as a script more than a language, because it's not actually compiled. Like this tool does not compile any executable code. What it does is that it encodes data, and I refer to all data in this game as definitions, which is why this tool is so lovingly called a D20 definitions editor. And then the game engine interprets the data scripts into meaningful logic. So you're going to get to see as we make this new spell how this all kind of ties together. But this allows me to do everything from conditional statements, triggers, events, all kinds of different things. Everything you would need to program a game as robust as a Magic the Gathering or a Hearthstone can all be done in this editor. And the beauty of it being built this way is that by having it all in this sort of interpreted script language, I can deliver over-the-air content within all distribution systems without having to release client updates. And as you may probably know, with when it comes to games, client updates are the bane of developers because every distributor that you have to work with to put your game out there, whether it be Steam, the Apple Store, Google, etc., all have various processes that inhibit the release and make it difficult to get your game content out as quickly as possible, right? So there's typically an approval process. There could be some downtime delay while it's propagating to the servers, various things. And when you've got a game of this scale where you need to keep all the data and everything synchronized with a mass user base, that's a big hurdle to overcome. But with over-the-air updates, I can simply have the game ping my server and say, hey, is there any new changes to the game? And it can automatically download those new scripts, get them into the game, and there's no client update necessary. It all happens in a matter of seconds. It's so fast and seamless that you don't even know it's happened as the user. But you come in the game and now you've got all this new content that you can enjoy. And that's the beauty of developing a system like this. All right, so without further ado, let's get this spell underway here. So I had just gone ahead and created the firewall, and I'm now taking the. So are you putting this game on the Reef.io? Yeah, as a matter of fact, that is one of the platforms that we'll be distributing on. So we've got a number of distributed platforms. Right now, everything in the game is entirely on our own website in pre-release form, and we will be distributing it on the Reef, on Steam, on mobile, on all kinds of places to get as wide a distribution as possible. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit C here, and I'm going to go ahead and now go into the spells, and I am going to go on to the Wall of Fire. And I'm going to go into Nested Status Effects here and hit Edit, and I'm going to go and now paste this data in. Load. Okay. Uh-oh. I think I did the wrong thing. That's not what I wanted. Go back to that status effect. I'm getting distracted now. All right. Ah, nice. Green says, I'm working on making a deal with the Reef so that I can develop their desktop application. Oh, excellent. That sounds very exciting. Yeah, the Reef is a cool up-and-coming platform that will allow you to work with the blockchain. So all the purchases are done via tokens. It's all secure, and it has some incentives for players earning tokens via interaction with the platform. So I'm kind of excited about that one. It'll help us get access to some players that may not have means otherwise to buy the game on things like Steam. So it's definitely a great and exciting idea. All right, so I'm sorry to go back to my wall of fire here, and I'm just losing my place here as I'm talking. Let's see here. Wall of fire, where did it go? Isn't that what it was called? Wall of fire. I'm losing my mind. Firewall. That's probably why I got confused. Okay. So what I meant to do was copy this. Okay. All right, now let's go back to the spells. Wall of fire. Okay, go here. Edit. There. Why does it keep saying fire damage on walk space? That is definitely strange. Oh, you know what? I didn't copy it correctly. Sometimes when I hit my copy key, I'm used to using Windows and Mac, and I hit the wrong button. All right, let's make sure we're getting the right thing here. You should, Green says, you should make a search bar so you can find all your things. Laughing out loud instead of scrolling through all of them. Yes. Funny as you say that, this is my to-do list here. Where is that statement I have in here? Tool enhancements. Where is that one? Search feature. Oh my God, this would help so much. Yeah. So yeah, that's definitely on my to-do list of things to do. Yeah, I have realized that while the scrolling is nice for ensuring you've got an exact thing, I need to have like a little thing where I can type and it finds it within the list because it is so hard to scroll through hundreds of items. That's definitely a big problem. Okay, so what I'm gonna do here is say get. I need to make sure this is actually copying the right thing. I should see firewall in here. Just make sure that's label firewall. Okay, so this is the correct thing now. Good. You're very organized. Thank you. I try to be. These I have various methods I use to keep track of things. For small tasks, I use my notepads and create little lists, and then for bigger things, I've got databases and spreadsheets that I use in the cloud. One of the great things about our pre-release is that the game um, tracks errors and bugs, and players, as they're experiencing bugs within the game, can directly report them by just hitting a button. It'll be like, oh, you found a bug, or I want to report something. And then it automatically updates to a database so I can keep a nice backlog of all the issues. And that also creates repro steps, which is great for me. So it's kind of like we've got this really awesome QA where players are just playing the game, enjoying it, and I'm getting all kinds of insightful information and making it better as they do so. All right, so I'm going to attempt this one more time here. Hopefully I have now copied the right block of stuff, and then I can get this to work. I was getting very confused as to why this was not. Let's get rid of this. The Notepad on Mac is so much nicer than the one on Windows. Yeah, I do like how it keeps everything nicely organized like this. All right, so let's copy this and put this in here. Oh, this is so strange. Fire damage on walk space. There is something strange that's going on here. For some reason, it's not loading this correctly, and I'm not certain as to why. Something with my tool here is still having a bug, and I'm not sure what's going on here with it. Yeah, that's weird. I wonder what could be the culprit here. This should be loading. Yeah, see, triggered ability, traits, nested, fire damage on walk space 2. Somewhere in that encoding of my piece here, this is having an issue. All right, you know what we're gonna do? I'm gonna try and do this a different way. All right, we're gonna scratch it that way. We're gonna go to status effects. I'm gonna try and rebuild this a different way. Okay, so let's go in here, edit, get data. Let's see if I can recreate it a different way. This may be an indicator I still have some kind of lingering bug with the nested system, which is weird because I've been testing it all week and have not encountered this issue before. All right, let's go to Wall of Fire. But it's possible there's some particular character in there that's just not gelling. Okay, so we're going to call this Wall of Fire status. Save. Okay, and then I'm just going to go ahead and save this on here right now. And then edit. Okay, and I'm going to go in here and edit this. All right, we're going to attempt to paste in. There we go. Fire damage on walk space. Save that. save this, and then save it again, and let's see if that is working correctly. Okay, that looks like it did recreate the structure correct, so that's good. All right, I'm not sure why it was not copying directly before, but I will definitely investigate that later. But let's get the rest of the Wall of Fire stuff in here. So firewall. All right, so I had this fire damage on walk space. We've got damage type fire, and I've got revealed as 1. So I need to make sure I copy those two things. Oh, and then I've got all the data for the status effect as well. All right. So you know what I'm gonna do? I'm just gonna take a screenshot of this so I can find it. Hide this. I need to basically recreate the same thing here because it's not letting me copy it over like I wanted it to. Wall of Fire. Okay. Green asked, do you prefer Mac or Windows? I honestly don't have a preference at this point. It's funny. For the longest time, I was a Windows PC guy. I used to build my own PCs, and then I had to get a Mac because it was necessary in order to publish to iOS. And so I got myself a. I'm developing on a 2012 MacBook Pro Retina. It was the first Retina generation of the MacBooks, and I love this thing. Mostly because the display is so sharp, the computer is super lightweight, and I can run Windows and Mac on it, so that's awesome. But when it comes to OS and operating systems, it's funny because so much of what I use tool-wise is all the same cross-platform. So there's very little difference switching between the two, other than the keyboard. Um, and at first, some of the differences on the Mac were confusing and weird. Now I've gotten natural or used to it. So I like them. I like them both equally. I think there's very subtle differences between the two. All right, so I need to go to my screenshot I just took, and I basically need to recreate what I saw in that screenshot here. Okay, so the first thing we have here, we're going to go into the status effect. Wish I had a way to do this better. Okay. All right, so we had the animation for the status effect, which is the particle of the fire, 158 and 159, 58, 159. So these correspond to the fire VFX we had created in the tool. I'll show those since we got Green here and he's new. I'll go back and be sure to showcase how that's working. That's a particle type status animation. It goes on the marker layer. Okay, and then I don't think fire is considered a buffer debuff, so we can leave that unchecked. Okay, none. I'm just looking for anything else that we need to get. Okay, then we need to put damage type fire under traits. And then there was one more thing that was the attribute revealed. And I'm pretty sure that was so that things would fly over it. Flying units would fly over the fire. Because if a trap's not revealed, they won't recognize that they're supposed to go fly over it. Okay. And revealed is 1. Okay. I think that's all we had to copy over. Then I think everything should be the same. Although I'm a little nervous. I'm curious if this is going to generate that error we had before where it was not saving the data correctly. Ah, I did. Okay, interesting. Interesting. So it looks like when I saved that, it generated some errors here. And that would indicate why we're having a bug. Okay, so Green asks, so does this double up as an engine, or are you using something like Unity in combination with this? Um, no, I compile the game in Adobe Air as well. So the game is running in Adobe Air, and then the tool is also in Air. All this data here is just basically outputting a SQLite database that then gets loaded by the game and does all the interpretation. But this tool also runs the game itself too. So I'm a little bummed. I seem to have found another error here, and clearly it was something we did in one of these tables that created this issue where it corrupted this file, and then it looks like the whole editor is now kaput, so I gotta close it down. So interesting. I've discovered a bug with my recent nested changes that will prevent us from getting this to work right now. And I'm very intrigued as to what it was that caused that. Let's see if we can isolate the cause, and I could probably debug it and fix it right here. So I'll go to spells, and we're going to go to the wall of fire again. Go to nested status effect. All right. So there's only a few possibilities. It was either this thing at the top or these things at the bottom. Let's try the things at the bottom first. Let's see what happens if I add attribute revealed, if that's the issue. I feel like I've done this before, so that probably isn't it, but we'll see. I have to keep looking over here because that thing's in my way. There we go. All right, let's save it now and see if that does anything. Okay, that wasn't it. Okay, and then there was a trait of damage type fire. I wonder if this has something to do with it. This tool seems super cool. I see it as another way of doing the Unreal Engine blueprints. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited. I'll give you a quick walkthrough of the tool as well because there's just a lot of really cool things that we can do in here. Um, let's hit save and see if that corrupts it. Okay, so that is what caused the problem. It was this trait here. So something about that trait um, must have some formatting that's corrupting the data structure. I'm not certain as to what it is yet. It's very weird. Okay, but now that we know the cause of that, we can fix that. We can work around it. All right. So wall of fire. All right, let's go back and put everything else in here that was working the way it was so we can show this thing off. Okay, edit. All right, let's put the particle back in. 158, 159, 159. And then animation type was particle. Okay, and then the animation layer is marker. All right, and then we're going to put attributes revealed. We will keep that in because that did not break it. So revealed is 1. Okay. All right, so we'll work with that. That did not corrupt it. So I know there's an issue with this, but that's not critical to finishing the work on this right now. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is change this from apply status effect in the global table to apply the nested one that's stored in here. Okay, and there we go. All right, so now we're going to go and put this into a deck and test it. All right. Green says, this tool seems super cool. I see it as another way of doing the Unreal blueprints, but a lot better than the blueprints and a lot easier. It seems as if you can just download this tool and use it straight off the bat since everything is in plain English and easy to understand, if you have some basic knowledge of game dev, etc. Absolutely. Yeah. So what I'm doing now is I'm going into my deck of test cards I created to test stuff. So then we're going to put that wall of fire spell into here. Where's that wall of fire? Oh, I'm sorry. Should be spell. I got my chat window on here, so I have a little hard time seeing things sometimes. Wall of fire, and then here we go. Save. Okay, so now we're going to go into the actual maps and test this card out, make sure the logic's working. So here's one of the cool things about the tool. So this is the base of the entire development tool I built here is entirely modular, and everything corresponds one-to-one with the various aspects of game development. So previously we were working on the game logic, which was programming the cards. This panel here is what allows you to build levels, right? So I've got all kinds of different maps in here. And you can see here, these are all just easy to paint on, put some dirt on there, etc. I can preview what this looks like in the game. Our game is going to be on PC and mobile and supports any level of orientation. So the other cool thing I can do is change the orientation here and view it from, here's what if I turn the phone to the left, here's if I turn it to the right. You can see the various patterns. The other cool thing about that is like things like the trees and stuff. So when the trees are occluding something, let me get like a tree that occludes something so you can kind of see what that looks like. There you go. So this tree is in front of them, and now if I change it to the right, you can see how it's behind them. So it's kind of a cool thing. Like all the graphics all correspond to how you orient it. It's pretty cool. So Green says, so you would be able to use this tool to make a 2D game that isn't a card game. Yeah, absolutely. You could use this tool to build anything. The idea around how I built the tool is that it's entirely modular, right? And I continually add to the tool all the time. So if you can come up with an idea for something you'd want to have in a game and how you'd want to program it, that can be added as a module. And then the principles of how it stores and distributes data is all consistent throughout. So when I need to add new tools to the tool, that's kind of a funny thing to say, it's very straightforward and easy to do. And I can, rest assured it's going to work because all the tool panels inherit from their existing base class panels. At some point in the future, once I've got the game done, I have made a commitment. I'd love to have this be something that I distribute and make available to other developers. While I personally am using the tool to build an ActionScript game, That doesn't mean that the tool itself could not be used with Unity. You could certainly use this with a Unity. You could use it with Unreal. You could use it with anything, um, because it's a self-contained program that basically is just manipulating data. And the tool also can self-edit itself. So, for example, here we are currently in the process, like I'm showing you, I can paint stuff on the board like so, right? And these are all done from these little palettes I've created here. It's kind of like let's put some brambles there, etc. Right? But where do these brambles come from? So that all comes from another module, which is the um, here. This is where I create the brambles at. So this is another definition that's stored within the tool. It controls the various facings for it. Here's a fun one. Let's look at the grass. This is interesting how the grass works. So the grass is all programmed. It's a single texture. It's not even green. It's actually like a white color. And then this tool can be configured to create variations and new palettes from it. The actual asset itself is derived from a dropdown, which is inherited from my assets. So this tool actually dynamically imports assets. So if I wanted to create new types of tiles, the artist would just go and create them. I'll show you what that looks like. So let's see, Summoner's Fate, assets. Oh, no, let's go into apps. So here's my like world assets, for example. There you go. These are all the game assets, and these are all basically just dropped into a Swift file, and then the artist would label it as such. And then when I import the Swift back into the tool, these would all appear in my dropdown, so I can select them. But see, like here's what the grass looks like natively. It's just can I drag here? Let's see. Oh, there's the hand. I need the hand. Go back to the hand. How did I get that hand? There it is. There you go. Huh, I don't know if I can drag and strip place either. So that's what our grass looks like. These are all just like, they're just textures. And then the engine actually colorizes them into various colors so I can actually paint and create new things with it. And so it's all very lightweight. I'll give an example. Like our game's footprint is 25 meg download, and it's a 50 to 100 meg fully expanded install footprint, depending upon how high a resolution your device supports. So if you're running on a lower resolution device, it's going to be a much smaller footprint. And that's because the game engine can dynamically raster all of the graphics at runtime. So what we do, we don't actually store any kind of traditional sprite sheet texture atlases. The game engine actually creates a dynamic texture atlas at runtime, and it does so in a way that it can fit everything into a single atlas. So there's only one draw call happening. So it's very performant. Like the game will run at 60 FPS even on older devices. Uses very low memory, and yeah, and it's very fast because of that. And because all the graphic illustrations, all the 2D stuff is vector native, that's why we get the super small footprint. So I can deliver the equivalent of a 2 gigabyte Hearthstone expansion, and I can do that in under 5 megabytes. And that's because of the vector nature of the assets. And then those, of course, all raster into graphics as needed by the engine when the game is running. So it's really, really sweet, really slick pipeline. All of our game animations, like our characters, those guys are all done via 2D armature. So I'll kind of show you what some of these look like. Let's go to something fun like where's my dragon? I like to show him off. Let's see. This is where I gotta get. I label these things. I need that search thing really bad so I can find stuff easier because I forget what I call stuff in here. One of my biggest problems is naming. I like to joke about how the giant challenge of any programmer is how to effectively name stuff. I spend so much time figuring that out. All right, so here's like a character in the game. Are you the only one working on this? I am the only developer, yes. So I created all the code, the engine, the tools, but I do have a team. So my indie team consists of myself as the main game designer slash game developer. My wife Kelly does our marketing and community management. So all of our social media posts and kind of creative energies behind that. So we're getting constant word out about the game. That's all her department. And then Peter is our animator, and he's one of the most essential people on our team because he allows me to create things like this. Um, so I understand how to like manipulate graphics really well, but I do not know how to create animations that look lifelike like this guy here. And this is really cool. So what Peter's done, he uses a tool called Dragon Bones to create 2D armatures, And what's amazing about this character is how lightweight it is. An assembly of a minute number of pieces. So there's um, a head, a head look up, a single wing, and the wing is just basically a sprite picture, like a sticker, and then a body, torso, an arm, and a leg. And he's able to create this entire looking moving skeleton thing from it. So again, the footprint for this guy is microscopic. It takes up almost no memory, and yet it creates something that looks as dynamic as a 3D model does when it moves around. So I can like show you its movement. All those wings, that's all mesh-based animation, and that's all vector driven. So we convert our vector to a raster at the whatever resolution we desire on the fly, and it can create something like this. And then we can even do like our particles and stuff like that, so you can see them breathing fire. When this cool tool comes out to the public, I'll definitely have my studio check it out. That's awesome. That would be so cool. Yeah, it's probably about a year out at least because my first priority is getting the game done. But yeah, I would definitely love to have something like this be a subject for like a GDC talk and showcase it. And as much as possible, I'd love it to be open source is my other key thing because so much of what I've been able to build the engine with is open source code, and having access to the code and be able to modify it as I needed to be able to do so is what makes this type of work possible. I can't take credit for having created all the different parts of it. It's using the minds of various very intelligent folks. Daniel Spurl, who does the Starling engine, Gil Amron, who does the DMT, which is the dynamic mapping texture atlas component, and then the Egret software, which does the Dragon Bones, has all of their armature-based code as open source. So what's really cool about the animation system we built is that essentially I've got it down to a science of when we want to create new characters, we build them as if you were playing with a stack of Legos, except the Lego pieces are all animated. So to make so my animator created this wing, and the wing is a self-contained subarmature that does the flapping, the bending, the warping. And I said, this is awesome. We used it to initially create the dragon, but I said, well, what if we want to have an angel character, right? So I have a humanoid character, and then we just stuck the wings on her. And that's literally all I did. In the actual art asset file, I stuck the wing on there. The art production team, which is the other part of our team, Ore Studios does all of our 2D art production. I send them a template that looks like a grayscale coloring book, and all they do is draw a static 2D image, and they send that back to me, and then the engine will create a fully articulated animation character like this. And I can tell as long as they're within the template guidelines that this will work one-to-one. So you can just drop stuff in and it works in the game at very low communication and changes necessary. So here we create an angel by just dropping the static wing onto the humanoid character, and then the engine will automatically detect that it's a wing and then assemble it as a moving wing part. And it will also know how to respond when it's doing the various animations to have it respond accordingly to its different things like attack, so it has like different animations it does. You could take the same thing. We had like a snake head armature, and we stuck that on a dragon to make where's our Hydra at? Let's see, Hydra. Yeah, so here's a Hydra, same principle. This is just a Lego example again. We have this animated snake head. We stuck it on stuck it on 5 times. It made a Hydra. Or if you want to be really creative, you could take the same concept and stick those heads on a big floating orb to make an oculoid. There you go. So that's another example. So these are all just reused animations that by kind of assembling them in creative ways, we completely maximize our production budget. In fact, what I should probably give you for a more robust explanation about this is gamedevchats.com. I'm going to show you this. This is my other website I do, where I teach game development and showcase things. But one of the things on here is one of our popular videos is this AAA production pipelines for indie teams. So this will give you a full-on walkthrough of all the principles involved in the creation of our asset tool. It kind of gives a more in-depth explanation of how it works. But this is really cool. And then how it also saves us tons of money as a small indie studio to create this kind of thing. So let's see, Green Blade. I can't read the whole message. I'm going to read it on my screen here. Says, that's perfect timing. We hope for our main big game to be out in around a year, and we're sponsored by FanHard, which gives us around $6 million people to advertise to. If we get big, we plan to do weekly podcasts where we invite indie devs and tool devs to speak about their games tools. That sounds awesome. Yeah, I would be happy to help support you and do a talk or come on board. I'm a big proponent of kind of sharing the knowledge I've learned and passing it along, paying it forward, if you will. Like I'm a big fan of pay it forward and things like that. So so many different folks in the game industry have provided support and helped me in ways that are just I can't ever pay them back. So I pay it forward by helping other indie studios that are they're kind of starting off or looking for unique angles of how to do things and providing that support back to them. So that's what my Game Dev Chats channel is about. It's just a way of sharing some knowledge I've learned working in the indie space and the AAA space and different things I've learned. I've got a great marketing talk on here as well that talks about kind of how we're doing our marketing because that's a big challenge with indie stuff. Um, there's also a really cool one on here. I'm not sure if I have my AI one on here, but one of the popular speeches is this one on AI development. Stop talking, Ross. This one here is also really good. How we create our AI is also a really fascinating talk. I compare it to pancakes and Back to the Future. So it's got some really cool analogies in there with that one. All right, I'm going off on a tangent now. I got to get this spell working now. So anyway, there's kind of like the overview of our tools and how those all kind of came together into creating this tool here. All right, so getting back on track, I was about to showcase our first test of the firewall spell, and so we're gonna go ahead and do that and make sure to see how this thing works. And again, it was weeks ago when we last left off at the firewall. So, oh, I need to change my deck to the test. Here we go. And here we go. Wall of fire. All right, so, oh God, yeah. I thought there was something wrong in the targeting for there, so it looks like I burned everybody. That's definitely not correct. It kind of looks interesting, of course, but definitely not what we wanted. Let's see if it's I'm burning in the fire. All right, so we got to go back and tweak that spell. I knew looking at it that there was something wrong about that. Um, where's my wall of fire again? Green says, I'm incredibly lucky to have an amazing team of around 60 indie devs doing what we love. We've got industry pros working with us, for example, the sound designer for all the sounds for Arma 3, and just overall a very motivated and well-functioned team. That's awesome. That is really cool. 60 indie devs, that's an amazing sized team. Wow, just incredible. And so cool that you guys can all work together and produce stuff like that. That sounds amazing. I hope we have a chance to meet perhaps at an upcoming um, show or convention. If you guys are planning to go to any of the PAXs, we've got plans later this year to attend DreamHack in Dallas, and then another one hopefully for PAX West in Seattle as well. So if you plan on going to these conventions, love a chance to meet in person and say hi face to face. All right, so let's go back to Wall of Fire. So the issue we had here is that the secondary targeting was incorrect. And last week we had created a new targeting method. I believe it was called here we go. Row of primary target. That's what the Wall of Fire should have been. So let's go ahead and save that, and I think that will get us working as we had expected. So grassy path. All right, just test the level here again, and start game again. And now let's see if the Wall of Fire is working as expected. There we go. That's what I wanted to see. So now you can actually see the targeting is going after a wall, and it's limited to just that one wall. Good. Okay, so things can walk through it. They get burned, they die. That's good. That's what we want to see happen. So now we're kind of where we left off last week, or not last week, but a few weeks ago when we started making this spell. I'm trying to remember what task we had left to do. So I know one of the things is that we have to make it so the firewall goes away after a set number of rounds, so it doesn't persist on the board. I should be able to dispel magic and get rid of it. That's cool. So you can clear it with a dispel magic. That's good. Okay, let's see what this says here. Interestingly, I'm not seeing a status effect description, so we probably want to showcase that on the tile as well. Green says, yeah, maybe the smaller game we're working on will do really well, which will enable us to go to conventions, etc., and show off our game. Yeah, that would be awesome. I wish you best of luck with that. Conventions are a great place to showcase work, to build an audience. It's funny, I've gone back and forth on the value of conventions from time to time. Initially, I had some doubts about conventions and the cost-benefit ratio, but lately I've been having a lot of success in showcasing with the Indie Mega Booth has been awesome for us because it helps us put us on the map with a larger group. And I also been tracking our telemetry and data and kind of like our reactions and things like that over time. So if you're interested in kind of how to prepare for conventions or what you might achieve in terms of ROI, I've got an entire series on Gamasutra that showcases how we've been doing at conventions, and it's got very specific data, budget breakdowns, really good stuff. All right, we've got a new person on the stream, PippoBox. Welcome to our stream. Whoa, this looks awesome. This is a mobile app game, and Greenblade says it will be for mobile and PC at PippoBox. Oh, cool, awesome. Oh, sorry, he was responding to PippoBox. Yes, this game I'm making is called Summoner's Fate. Our website is summonersfate.com. So if you want to kind of read a little bit more about it, check it out while we're doing the development work here. Our site's up. We do have our pre-release available now on PC and Mac, and that also comes with access to our mobile builds via TestFlight and the Google Beta program. So if you buy the pre-release, you can get access to all platforms and help us in developing and shaping the game live. I do these streams once a week, and typically I release new content on each stream as well. Although that won't be happening this week because I'm sort of in between clients right now. I'm actually planning a big client update. Recently, we've changed all of our data formats to it. So typically on the streams, I develop content, and this particular piece we're really working on right now is the Wall of Fire spell, which, as you can see, creates a big wall of fire. And so I'm trying to figure out, this is something we had started a few weeks ago and didn't finish, and I'm trying to remember what tasks are left on it. Clearly, it's burning people, which is good. Yeah, so welcome PippoBox. I always enjoy meeting new people on our stream, and I hope you stick around and check us out. Feel free to ask any questions as we go about making this. All right, so I'm gonna make a little to-do list here. I love to make a list, and this is why I love this little text editor here. But let's see, Wall of Fire left to do. To do. All right, so we're gonna make a list of things we have to finish. So one thing I know we haven't done yet is Wall of Fire should burn out or go away after 2 rounds. That's something we have to do. I noticed that we weren't showing any kind of status effect on the board, so we need to add a description to the status effect so that players have a reference for what the fire does. Okay. What other things is there to do? Looks like we got the targeting working correctly now, so that's a good thing. Let me undo that spell and see what else is on the card text. I probably got to clean up the card text is another thing, just kind of finalize it. Set fire to target row for 2 rounds. Units take 2 damage when entering or beginning turn on fire tile. Oh, I don't think I'm not sure if we have a trigger for the beginning of turn. Let's see what happens here. Okay, yeah, I feel like the fire should initially damage them when it's placed. So let's add a note for that. Fire should deal damage when initially placed. Okay, so we'll have to add a trigger for that so they take damage. And then let's see if it does damage on the start of turn. Oh, okay, so let's see what the AI does. Okay, so they didn't take any damage at the start of their turn either. They're standing in fire. I feel like they should be taking some damage there. All right, so we need to add that as well. PippoBox says, thanks, Ross. We'll definitely check out your websites and support how I can. I'm digging the art style a lot. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that compliment on the art style. That is something that we worked very, very hard on to get right. I think it was over 6 months of testing to figure out how to make top-down look beautiful. Yeah, and we're really excited. Kind of our signature trait in the game is this lookup thing, which is kind of fun. Players often give us mixed feedback about that. It's very polarizing. The first time you see it, it's kind of like, man, don't their necks hurt looking up at the player like that? So I like to joke that they've got like these special joints that prevents them from getting sore necks looking up. But the idea is that like the player, they're looking up at you as if you're a god commanding them from the sky to tell them what to do. And we like that feeling because it also gives you a nice personal connection to characters. You don't really feel a connection to characters when you just see the top of their head. So by having them make eye contact with you and sort of break that fourth wall, it creates a connection emotionally with the character. It also is great for signaling you that they have something to do. Like, I've got all kinds of different. I double up with our visuals. They look up. They've also got the triangle, so like, hey, do something with me. And then once he's done his thing, now he looks down and he's done. So I know I've commanded him this turn. That's the idea behind that. Okay, so I'm also going to write down our to-do list here for the wall fire. Fire should also burn characters standing in it at the start of turn. Okay, so we're gonna have to add some additional triggers, if you will, to the fire so that it's causing damage to them. Okay, so fire should burn out. Okay, let's see. And so Green says, so with this tool, would I be able to make a side view 2D game using this tool? I imagine you can, but is it supported? I mean, yeah, I would say you could build any kind of game with this tool. Side scroller supported as well. I mean, part of the reason I've invested so much into this tool is that it's kind of the future of our studio. I want to be able to create continuous games with it. At some point in the future, I hope to take this thing to game jams, just completely blow blow the competition out of the water because I can just rapidly create stuff out of nothing and have it all in the testing environment here. But yeah, of course you could, and it gets the most benefit when you can integrate the engine itself into it as well, which is part of the reason I think I would build the tool as an open source so that if you were building in Unity or another engine, you could just use it as a framework, I guess, if you will, and have it import and actually run your real game engine here. Um, yeah, it's the tool is not, I would say, designed to be like, how would I describe it? It's universal in the sense that it's all based on object-oriented principles and basic um, similar reused ideas about how it edits data. But when it comes to the actual specifics of the game itself, kind of like any other framework where you would go and do like a multiplayer programming, that'd be like saying, does a multiplayer server like Player.io, which is what we use, does it support any type of game? Yes, it does. But the specifics of how you would build your client are entirely up to you. Do you plan on making something like this for 3D? I don't have any plans for that right now. I made a very deliberate choice of making the game 2D because for a lot of reasons. 3D has a exponentially higher development production costs, which is something that makes it very hard for an indie studio like mine to afford. 3D is not timeless in the way that 2D is. So when you create a 3D game, by the time you come to release, your game is already obsolete in terms of the latest graphics engines available and can often look dated. And for a game like this, where I intend to run this for the next 10 to 20 years, I guarantee this art style will look as good as it does now 20 years from now, whereas something that was made in 3D would not. So that's one of the reasons I personally like to invest in 2D development. But yeah, could you do it in 3D and would the definitions and principles all still work the same? Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Or adding 3D support for this tool. Yeah. In terms of like what it can or can't support, that's it like anything program wise. I like to make this joke. If you can envision it, it can be done. Yeah. So it could certainly do those things. At its core, all this tool is really doing is just storing a bunch of zeros and ones. In fact, I think I showed one of those blobs earlier. Yeah, here's one of the examples. It's encoding definitions data into meaningful syntax that the game engine interprets and then turns into game logic. So if you've got if you configure your game to follow a similar structure, you could have this definition that or build anything you'd like. Instantly, even these fire effects, I'll show you, like those fire particles are actually built in the tool itself as well. So I referenced earlier those numbers. I'm trying to remember which ones those referenced to, but yeah, see here's our fire effects. And somewhere, yeah, here's that firewall. So here's the actual wall of fire. This is actually all built within the tool. And there's two different layers of fire that can be placed on it so that you've got like the smoke and the fire. But I mean, like you can completely customize how these things look and colorize it. And this is amazing because all I'm doing here is changing numbers, and then the engine's going to interpret those particles in different ways. So the cost of this is almost nothing, and I can export this. This works It's compatible with a particle designer tool that's available on Mac. That's one of the softwares I use. One thing I would change about this tool is a better, I can't read that, is a better front end, so it looks a little sleeker and a little better. It looks good now, but I feel like it could look better. But that's obviously not important. Oh no, of course it's important. Yeah, yeah, it's definitely designed to be functional and um, yeah, of course it could be better and more intuitive, and there's lots that could be improved with it. But again, it's the tool is also a means to an end, which is the production of this game, which is the top priority. Whether I decide at some point in the future to invest heavily into building tools is an entirely different thing. I like to talk about the motivation for me as a programmer is to eliminate the barriers that prevent creation. So the reason I made this tool is because it allows me to create, bring to life creations more easily and directly than if I didn't have the tool. So that's why I created it. It's a way of destroying barriers to creation. The creation of what I'm making is far more important than the means through which I get there. The means are only important in how they empower the act of creation. So that's kind of how I would talk about the prioritization of the tool. But I make judgment calls in my process all the time about how much time should be spent on the tool versus how much time on the game. It's a constant struggle, and definitely it's been wearing my um, anxiety a bit, having gone so many weeks now without having made large segues in the game because of the need to invest time in the tool to prepare us for the long-term things necessary in making our single-player experience. Safety Seth Plays has joined the stream. Hi there, Ross. How are you doing tonight? I am doing quite well. It is what time is it here now? 10:30 a.m. here in Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm assuming you're hailing from elsewhere on the world if it's evening for you. So pleasant evening to you. It's a pleasure to have you here on our stream with us. I am always excited to meet new players or new developers and new people on the stream. Let's see, I'm going to read some more comments here. Green says, personally, a software developer looking to make software for the game industry, my top priority is making the tools and not the game. Interesting. Yeah. In many cases it is, and it's tough. I definitely have a love of tools and a love of game making, so it's definitely to each their own there. And Seth says, greetings from Quincy. Okay, great, Quincy. Oh, and this is Jimmy again. Oh, okay, yes, I got to memorize your get familiar with the names. Okay, yes, that's right. And you were here last week too. Yeah, that's awesome. Fantastic. Glad to have you back. Glad to have you back. Yeah, usually after a couple times I start to memorize the usernames associated with folks. So safety, yes. Jimmy, we met at PAX East in Boston just a few weeks ago. It's crazy. All right. All right. So I'm trying to remember where we were at now. Yes, we were making the list of what has to be done on Wall of Fire to make that spell work here. So I got my to-do list. Wall of Fire should burn out. We got to add a description. It should deal damage when initially placed, and it should also burn characters standing on it at the start of turn. All right. So now we've got all of our tasks for to-do list on Wall of Fire. Let's get this card done. All right. So Wall of Fire. I'm going back into the spell, and now what's awesome is I can program all the logic directly within the spell itself. All right. We got some more comments. If this tool is made in C++, I would definitely help you develop it unless I was working on Reef. And Pippobox says, your YouTube channel is very informative. Gonna spam some videos. Hope to learn what I can. Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, there's lots of good stuff on there. All right. So edit. All right. So far we've got a trigger for dealing fire damage when you walk on the space. And one of the things we want to do is add a new trigger so that characters standing on the space take damage. Oh, here's where we can add a description of what the firewall does. So we could say something here like deal 2 damage when walking on, or what should we say? When standing on. Let's see, I'm trying to think how to describe this in the least amount of words possible. Deal 2 damage when standing on tile or at the start of your turn. Deal 2 damage when entering this space or standing on at start of turn. There we go. And we can control that too. We can have start of turn, end of turn. Green says, do you have a Discord server? Yes, absolutely we have a Discord server. You can get to it from our summonersfate.com page and click on the little Discord guy at the top there, or if you scroll down here and say chat with us live on Discord, I've also got a link there that will take you to our D20 Studio Discord. And we have a verified server with D20 Studios, so yes, please welcome to join there. I've also got a developer. In fact, you know what? I'll give a quick walkthrough of our. Do I want to do the Discord? I'm not sure if I do because I've got messages up there. There's a when you go into the Discord, there's a roles channel, and you can type in and say I'm a developer and hit the little button, and it'll sign you up as a developer. And then we've got a developer channel specifically for sharing and talking about game dev that you can join within our community as well. Okay, let's go back to blah 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 blah. What was I at? Oh yeah, I was making this trigger spell. Okay, so deal 2 damage when entering the space or standing on it at start of turn. Okay, that's a little bit verbose, but we'll go with that for now. So we've got something. Okay, now we've got to actually make those triggers. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new ability, edit. All right, and trigger type, we want to make this happen at the start of your turn. Okay, and then we want this to, I'm trying to remember how we're going to program this. Trigger event method, start a turn. It has to be a character standing on the same space as. I'm trying to remember how I've done this in the past. I'm going to go back, actually, before I do this, I'm going to go back and look, because I know I've made a spell that does this, or triggered ability that had a lava tile. Oh, you know, it's my lava tile, I think. Let's look at that and see if I can find it. Placeables, tiles. I know I had a lava tile. I'm trying to think if this had one. Yeah, here we go. Fire damage on start of turn. This is what I want. How did I do this? Trigger event start turn. Unit on ability user space. Wow, I did not even know I had a trigger for that. I was trying to think like what trigger could I possibly have done to do this with, and here it is. Okay. Brilliant. Brilliant indeed. Okay, that would be just perfect for what we need to do. All right, let's get this thing. I'm going to copy this over here. Let's go back into that tile. Spells, wall of fire. Okay, that's what I wanted. Although I wonder if that's going to have that same issue because it's got that attribute it doesn't like. Now let's try it and see what happens. No, that worked. Cool. Okay, so fire damage on start of turn. Good. Okay, good. We do not need a description here. Save. Okay. That worked. Good. And this worked. Excellent. Okay. Cool. All right. So now we've added a trigger, or we've added a damage for start of turn. Walk space. Okay. Good. Okay. And make sure I'm gonna put another note in here. Make sure the fire deals 2 damage. And I'll show you how we're going to control that as well. Okay, so we added the description. Fire should deal damage when initially placed. We haven't done that yet, so we'll have to do that. Fire should also burn characters at start turn. We've done this. Okay, let's go ahead and program another piece of it, which is the deal damage on a fix. So, Green says, your Discord server is nice. Thank you so much. Normally, I would be greeting you on the Discord with a little customized character image, which I'll probably go ahead and do after the stream, but since I'm streaming now, I can't do that. I like to welcome everybody with one of our unique 200 characters. Let's see. All right, so I'm going to... Do I want to copy this? Let's copy this one. All right. We're going to call this fire damage on a fix. So when the fire is initially placed, we also want to deal damage to the character. So trigger event, start of turn. Nope, we want to do a fix status. Okay, unit on ability user space. Awesome, that would work just fine. Okay, and we don't care about this flying thing. Unit on ability user space. Okay, so I'm gonna. Okay, let's see here. All right, we want to do Green says there's some issues with the server, but it's nice. We primarily focus on marketing on the Discord server, which has over 1K members. So if you need help setting up yours, let me know. If you've got 1K members in your Discord, I would love to get some feedback on how to get more people in. That would be awesome. Yeah. The main issue I can see with your server is that anyone can add everyone, meaning that I can ping everyone your server and spam that. That's a good point. We don't want that happening. Yeah, I will. I'll pick your brain later today and see if I can get some good insight because Discord, I'm always looking for ways to improve that and help streamline the community and make it more effective. So that would be awesome to pick your brain. All right. Let's see here. So trigger subject, we want event activator. Let's see, is equal to let me see how I'm trying to think about how to say this. When we affix the status, the event activator is equal to the ability source. Trigger subject, ability source. So these are some conditions so that my trigger ability will work correctly with the logic of the game. So what I'm saying here is that I want to make it so the fire deals damage when the wall is initially placed. So the trigger event for that is when we affix the status. The fire is just a status effect that's being put on the board. Okay? And we're going to target the unit that's standing on the space we're affixing to. But without any kind of conditions, this trigger event will fire automatically whenever any type of status effect gets affixed, which we don't want. So we want to put an initial condition of the activator, which is the status effect, is equal to the ability source, which is I'm trying to think. Ability source. What does that say? The unit or status effect this triggered ability is attached to. So that's the status being affixed is the one that actually has this power. That's what we're saying. Okay, and I think that's the only condition we need. Green says, around an hour and a half, I'll be leaving my house, and I won't be home again until tomorrow. Oh, no worries. Then let's connect tomorrow then. I'll reach out. I'll send you a friend request so we can chat offline, Green. That would be great. Okay. Okay, so now we've got subtract from attribute life remaining. That's the correct effect. And actually, I think everything else here should probably be okay. So let's save that. And yeah, we're going to go ahead and save that and see what happens. All right, so say this is done. And we may have to go and test that again, but we'll come back. Okay, and then let's go test what we've done so far. Then we'll go ahead and add the rounds limitation, so that it burns out after a few rounds. All right, let's save that. Okay, so now we can go back to our maps. Man, that is already so much nicer having the ability to edit all the logic directly within that status effect. So I didn't have to go and scroll through a giant list of things. I was able to do it all right within that firewall. Start game. Okay, so we should now see damage taking place. You know what? I can't see what those cards are. Let's turn the cards off. Debug, test option, show AI cards, get rid of that. And good. Start game again. Okay, now I can see them. Okay, so that trigger didn't work. They didn't take any damage from the initial placement, so there's something wrong with that trigger. Let's take a look at the log and see if it tells us any information. Okay, wall of fire resolves, cast wall of fire. So interestingly, it didn't even seem to trigger it, which tells me there's something wrong with that condition initially placed that I'll have to go take a look at. Let's see if they take damage at the start of the turn. Okay, looks like my AI is thinking here. Getting some kind of bottleneck. I should probably just turn off their cards so they don't have anything to do. Or I don't know what's happening. Something's happening. It's possible I may have broken the game because it looks like it's spinning absorbently long there, so there may be something very wrong with that trigger. And then we have Moony Elf has joined. Hello, I'm Jimmy's girlfriend. He told me about meeting you and your game. Oh, welcome. It's so great to have you on our stream with us today. Thank you for joining. And then Green says, I think you should make it so that you can't just place the wall where the other player is. Otherwise, that's a little bit OP. Interesting. Oh, there it goes. Wow, I don't know why that processing took so long. That is really strange that the AI took that long to process. I'm very concerned that there's something that happened with that trigger that caused it to last so long. I'm going to go look at the log and see if there's anything weird in here. So it also looks like it didn't trigger the damage on start of turn because they didn't take any damage at the start of the turn like they were supposed to either because he's clearly still standing in the fire and didn't get hurt at all. He does get hurt walking into it. Okay, so that is working. And it is dealing 2 damage. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Oh, man. Why did the... Yeah, that's a good point about the fire not being able to be placed directly on units. That's something we should consider. All right, so let's look at the log and see if... Counter. Where did my turn start here? Cast Fireball on... Okay, that's where its turn started. Okay, here we go. Turn started. Interesting. So it doesn't even look like that trigger happened because I see no reference of that wall of fire even triggering at all. So something didn't seem to fire any of those changes we made. It almost looks like we didn't make any changes to it at all. Interesting. I'm going to turn this off over here. None. Okay. All right, let's go back to the wall of fire and see if we can track down what may have been the cause of this problem. So when I initially made that trigger with the start of turn, that is so old. All right, let's see. Unit on ability user space dot player ID is equal to trigger subject event activator property player ID. What is going on with that? That is a really weird condition. Okay. Those are really weird conditions. I'm not really certain as to why this can... Again, this is a triggered ability I would have made years ago because I think this is an early experiment I made. All right, so I'm trying to figure out what my logic here means. Trigger subject. The unit on ability user space's player ID is equal to the event activator player ID. That makes no sense. And let's get rid of this too. That doesn't make sense either. Okay, that should fix that. And fire damage on a fix. This condition must be wrong, and I'm not sure why it's wrong. I'll come back to that one. And this can be not any unit. We want this to be assigned. And this should also be assigned too. Okay. Event activator could be assigned as well. Just a little bit less verbose targeting. And very good. Okay, let's go ahead and check it out now and see what happens. Dun 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 dun. Grassy path. Alrighty, here we go. Okay, so we know that's still broken, but let's see if they take damage at the start of the turn. Nope, they did not. That is quite curious. They should definitely have taken damage. So it's possible that let's see if it even triggered it. Let's see. There was no condition, so it should at the very least have triggered it. All right, let's see. So here's where the turn started. Interesting. I don't see... Oh, that's very weird. I am perplexed. It's almost like that trigger event's not even registering at all. Because what I should be seeing here is where the computer starts its turn, which is right down here. I should be seeing a trigger for that firewall kicking in. Are they immune to fire? Says Mooney. No, they are not immune to fire. They definitely take damage from fire when they walk in the fire. Oh, I know what it is. It just occurred to me. It just occurred to me what the problem is. Okay, let's go back to that wall of fire. I'm pretty sure that I forgot to change. Yes, I did. So we are still referencing the old globally stored wall of fire status effect and not the one we've been editing here. Classic mistake, Ross. Okay, let's change that to nested 0. That would be why. I'm like, because it's the very least it should be triggering, even if it's not doing anything. All right, that should probably fix both the problems. Let's go take a look. Okay. That's better. That's betters. Okay, here we go. So, burn skeletons! Wow, that was quite the explosion there. I'll move that up again. I think I've got like an explosion V effect on that burn. How many monitors do you have? I am currently streaming on, and I typically use just one monitor. I work almost exclusively off my laptop, so I've got like a chat widget in the corner so I can read text directly on the screen on the single monitor. But I also have another desktop monitor that's behind me, so when I get like a bunch of text and I can't read it, I look over at the screen over here to view the stream monitor. But generally, I just work on the one monitor. All right, so here we go. So that was interesting. So the explosion effect is probably inappropriate for just a simple burn, so we're going to have to go and take that out. Let's add that to our to-do list. Also, it's only dealing 1 damage. It also looks like there's like a cascade happening there, probably because of the... Not really sure why that cascade's happening. Maybe because that tree was being burned there. We'll take a look at that. Okay, good to know. Another way we could probably handle that damage effect is probably just do it directly in the spell. That would probably be a better way to do it, honestly. All right, let's see. Green says, I'm thinking about getting a 49-inch ultra-wide monitor for Samsung since they're super nice. Yeah, 49-inch monitor would be freaking awesome. That would be pretty sweet. 49-inch. Wow. Yeah, at some point when we become super successful, it'd be great to have like an awesome studio with like one of those giant curved, fully immersive type of things, right? But I make do. I like to do things very light and efficiently, so having everything on the laptop's nice because the other thing when you travel a lot or work in different places, which I often do, and you get used to a really giant monitor, you can feel cramped working in a small space. Then so I guess kind of like lowest common denominator. If I'm used to working on a 15-inch monitor, then I can be comfortable working anywhere, which is kind of nice in ways. Mooney says I use my 47-inch TV as a second monitor for streaming. Yeah, very cool, very cool. And you stream too, so we got to get you streaming some Summoner's Fate. That would be awesome. All right. All right. So we're gonna put some more notes on here. The initial damage of the firewall is only dealing 1. It should be 2. Check the method for the damage. Suggest using direct causing initial damage directly in the action versus the trigger. I think that'd be a better way to do it. Okay, all right. Now let's see if the fire is dealing damage at the start of the turn. Let's go ahead and set you on fire again. Ah, take damage, burn. Okay. Oh, yeah, the explosion is a bit much. Explosion VFX is a bit much. For burn. We're in the middle of moving, but as soon as we're settled, I'll get back on it. Yes, Ross, as soon as I can, I'll stream your game. Fantastic. We would love that. Absolutely would love that. All right, here we go. Interesting. So they all took damage, but there was like a weird delay there where it's... Oh, it's because that guy died in the middle of it. Okay, so it was showing that he died, and so it separated it. Yeah, okay. I think we can fix that by getting rid of those VFX, but it is working correctly now, so the fire is doing its thing. Certainly that VFX is too much. I definitely think there could be some VFX that's better than just this. Would be cool to have. But yeah, my primary goal right now is not so much VFX as it is getting functionality done. We're going to do a full VFX polish later on. And Green says, do you have a list of influencers that would be interested in trying out your game? Yeah, of course I do. We've been building that list for some time. Most of the folks I've reached out to so far regarding influencing are waiting for our official Steam release. So when we go to Steam Early Access, because they do almost all their games via Steam. And they're also, of course, looking for the single player. So right now our game is currently... It does support single player in the sense you can fight against the AIs, but the campaign and like kind of like the true single player experience is not in the game yet. It's mostly a PvP battle type of situation. So a lot of those streamers are waiting. They said, yeah, hit me up when you've got access to, or the single player component finishes. I'm really looking forward to that. Yeah, he says that's really good. Yeah, very absolutely important. Yeah, there's some definite top people that I'm very excited to have play our game, for sure. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and tweak this firewall some more. I think we're just about there with getting it where we want it to be. Kind of funny that I had that issue with it earlier. All right, so let's see. Okay, so let's go back into here. All right, now, okay. So interesting that the fire on walk space is doing 2 damage here. I'm assuming that's because, yeah, I'm curious as to why this one did 2 damage and the other ones didn't. That's also very strange because there's nothing in here that says 2. Oh, no, it probably did do 2. Let's see. Let's go back to that again. I want to check that one more time. Grassy path. Okay, here we go. Grassy path. Grassy path. All right, I want to make sure that they are. Tree just exploded. Okay, 1. Okay, good. That's what I wanted to see. All right, good. So the way we're going to fix that problem with the damage is just to ratchet up the damage within the actual effect itself. So what we're going to do is do Wall of Fire, and we're going to pass in an amplitude value of 2, and that will make it so that all the damage scales to the new number. Okay. And I can even do, put this little placeholder in there, amp. There we go. So now that 2 is actually being derived from the action effect. So if I wanted to change it and say, oh, you know what, I want the firewall to deal 3 damage instead, now the description is dynamically linked to the actual game logic. Kind of a cool thing to do there so that it's always consistent, right? Cool. I really like that card design. It looks super cool, says Green. Thank you, Green. I appreciate that. Yeah, we're really proud of our art style. It's got like a nice, very clean, readable look to it. When we described the vision for it, we were like basically take what Stranger Things did for making nostalgic things like D&D look cool and apply that to a 2D top-down art style. That was kind of like the inspiration for us. And Mooney also really likes that card design. Thank you. Yeah. Here's some of our other card border arts. So these are different types of spells we got in the game based on different schools of magic. Yeah, that's the void right there. But yeah, so you can change all the different assets in here. This is a chaos spell. All of our magic in the game is based on the aspects of creation. So chaos is born of the void. It's the raw, pure potential energy that comes out of non-being, and generally, because of its chaotic nature, is associated with destruction and things like that. It's unstable, but very high output energy and things like that. So Wall of Fire is appropriate for that. Okay, so let's see. We saved that. So we should have fixed this part now. So this should be fixed. Check it. All right. The initial damage of the firewall is only dealing 2. Oh. Yeah, so we'll go back and check that. Same thing as this. It's the same as that one above. Okay. Check the method for damage. Okay, yeah, we were talking about making it so that it just deals damage directly on the target space. So what we're going to do with that is select damage by 2 and save. And I'm going to have that do that same amount of damage on, what's it called? Not just target, but how do I do this now? Primary target loc. Target, yes. But I also want to do that damage to the character standing on the target locations. Let's try it this way. Subtract from life remaining. Life remaining. That card changing system is so amazing. You can change the card and the text still fits. It's actually really amazing. And I don't know why I'm so impressed, but that's genius. Yeah, actually, it's really cool. It's all dynamic too. So you can see as I'm typing here, and it's always going to shrink the text to fit on the card. It obviously at a certain point it becomes unreadable, but it will never not go on the card. Let's see. Boom. Oh god, I put way too much on there. Go away. Yeah. I'm going to show you another cool thing with this too in a second that we're going to add our localization to it for translating it. Okay, so subtract from attribute, life remaining was what I was trying to find here. I'm so pleased. This has been a very a lot of new folks and a lot of chat on our stream today. I'm so grateful to have so much activity. Thank you guys again for being here and going on this journey with me. Number 2, and then this time I'm going to do the damage directly to the primary, let's see, primary location unit. Save. Oh, yes, I do have a copy. Sweet. And this will be a primary, secondary target logo. Okay. Loc unit. Okay. So what I'm doing here is basically I added some additional effects. This is going to make it so that it does the initial damage directly to the characters on placement rather than having to use that trigger ability. So it destroys the ground. It deals 2 damage to the character standing on the primary location and 2 damage on the unit standing on the secondary location. Moonleaf says, Moony Elf says, what was your inspiration for this game? The inspiration for this game was that growing up, I played a lot of tabletop RPGs, miniature based. If I was sitting in my basement room where I usually stream, I've got display cabinets full of miniatures. We're talking hundreds of miniatures. Warhammer, Fantasy, 40K, Dungeons and Dragons, things like that. Played a lot of Magic the Gathering, those type of games, like classic tabletop card and board games and RPGs. I love those games, growing up with them. But the problem I had was that as I grew up, got a full-time job, started a family, it became way, way harder to get the groups together to play those type of games. They took hours to play. There was a lot of fighting over the rules. So I wanted to take the inspiration of the passion of those games and combine them all into a very easy to access game that provides the same kind of experience, but in short window bursts. So kind of the mashup is, imagine if you took Dungeons and Dragons and Magic the Gathering and combined them together and were able to get the same awesome experience in as little as 5 minutes. That's what Summoner's Fate is. And Summoner's Fate's actually the sequel to my first game called Hero Mages, where I attempted to do the very same thing. Hero Mages was initially a board game I designed and then created that into a digital experience. I launched that game in 2009, and then after that game kind of completed its development launch window, I went to work for EA for 4 years to gain kind of professional experience. And now I'm back making Summoner's Fate, which is the successor, which is basically adding all the things I always wanted to do with the first game, but making it way, way better. And Green says, this tool gets better the more I see you use it. That's awesome. So glad to hear that. All right, so I've added all the effects to this. Now we're going to go back into the, let's save it as we go along too. Okay, I'm going to go in here and edit this, and we're going to go ahead and we can probably remove this fire damage on a fix now since we're adding the damage directly. Why did you choose to go with the ActionScript code to tool this, by the way? Is it the only language you know, since you can make this tool in most languages? I've got just my software engineering background. I've done just lots of ActionScript work. So I had a lot of libraries and tools I've already built and familiar with, and it's nice to reuse things like my own animation engine and things like that I've used over the years and I can rely on and count on. So it was just kind of like a more or less an easy transition. And at the time when I started working with it, Adobe was also very much backing behind game development with ActionScript and their tool set. And that's kind of since kind of died down a bit, although they're still continuing to support the Air platform. So at some point, it may be necessary to port all of this to another language. Thankfully, I've got lots of potential exit strategies in the event that that happens. One thing we're looking at doing is taking everything into HAX and moving it there, since a lot of the libraries are already compatible and HAX can already natively use the assets. But more so, one of the big reasons I wanted to use ActionScript is because of the asset pipeline. So at the time when I started, Unity did not support any kind of native vector assets. I think that changed in 2018. They started launching some support for SVG graphics. But again, even today, as far as I understand, Unity still does not support SVG in the way that ActionScript or the Swift files can. And I mentioned it's very important for me to be able to deliver over-the-air content in as lightweight a package as possible, and to make it so that our graphics all scale to the most beautiful resolution. I mean, what's great about our art style in Summoner's Fate is that if you're using a 4K monitor, our game looks amazing because everything will scale to the DPI of your monitor, so everything looks crystal sharp. I mean, I'm talking razor sharp edges on the characters. When people see our show at expos, they're like in awe of it because most of the competition is all very pixelated graphics, which look cool, but when you scale those up on TVs, they kind of look blotchy and blurry, whereas our stuff looks super crisp because of that vector style. And that was really important to us. And the only language that supports that platform-wise is ActionScript right now. He says C++ would work well. I'm sure it would. The other reason I used Arrow is it had already built-in tools for the cross compiler. So I'm targeting mobile devices and things like that. And while I know you could export and eventually like port all those things with C++ as well, that's an entirely additional overhead that I didn't want to take on. So it's kind of like the best way to leverage experience I already had with the support I needed to do the vector graphics with the ability to cross compile to the other platforms already out of the box that led to that decision. So those are kind of the main reasons behind it. One thing I'm sad about is there's not a native export option for consoles, so I do want to get on Nintendo Switch in the future and other consoles as well. That's why I said likely at some point in the future I will be looking at maybe moving to HAX or something that's sort of a natural um, conversion plan. Yeah, it would take a lot more to make this in C++ though. Interesting. Yeah, I do have some C++ experience. That's actually the first language I ever programmed in. So yeah, one of my favorite exercises learning C++ was writing my own language and compiler in C++. That was probably the best course in computer science I ever took. It was absolutely fascinating. Maybe Java would work well. Seeing the Equivalence engine made me feel like Java can do almost anything. Yeah. Yeah, ActionScript and Java are also very, very similar. They're almost identical in terms of the syntax and the language and um, things like that. So yeah, Java I'm also very familiar with. And okay, so I removed that trigger. The other thing we had to do was we want to get rid of that very obnoxious VFX. So what we're going to do is get rid of, let's see, I think I want to say burning torch here. Get rid of this fireball animation. That's the explosion effect there. Let's save that. Okay. And then, yeah, that looks good. Okay. I think that should do all the errors we wanted to fix. So then I think once we've tested this, all we should have to do is then go back and, okay, this should be fixed. And this should also be fixed. All right, let's take a look now. All right, let's see what we got. I think this will get all those other issues we had fixed. Okay, so we'll go back to test this on Grassy Path. All right. Java, ActionScript, and C# are basically the same thing. Yeah, they are. I mean, subtle differences in the formatting of the functions and the syntax, but logic-wise, all works very similar. Okay, so here we go. Interesting. Oh, okay. So I see a bug there. It looks like when we changed the VFX, she did take damage initially, but the secondary targets did not take damage. I'm assuming if I had cast that over here, he would take the damage. Yes. Okay, so we got to fix that bug. All right, let's write that down. Secondary target units are not taking damage. Okay. All right, let's take a look at start a turn. Okay, good. They all took damage at the start of turn. That was good. Excellent. Okay. Okay, and then they should also be taking damage when they walk into it. Let's try out this too. I'm just curious on that. Burn the tree down. Interesting. That destroyed the tree. Oh, interesting. That looks like it seemed like it did double damage to the tree. Weird. Curious why they didn't like it. That should have just burned the tree, not like destroyed it outright. And that didn't do anything to the tree. That's also weird. Why did that tree burn down and this one didn't? I'm boggled by that one. Huh. That is weird. Huh. There's definitely some kind of weird thing going on there. I think I'm going to change it back to how I had it before because I don't like the way that that's looking. Yeah, that's weird. That tree should be burning down and not the other tree should not be burning away. Okay, let's go back to the drawing board again. spells. I'm gonna get this right. We're gonna keep tweaking it till it makes that wall of fire beautiful. Okay, let's get rid of this. I don't like doing it this way. Get rid of you. Get rid of you. All right, let's just put that back to how it was. And let's go back in here and let's go into let's copy that and let's edit this. Fire damage on affix. Let's change this back to the original condition we had before, which was trigger event, affix, status, yep. And the only condition we need to have here is trigger subject, event activator, which is the status effect, is equal to trigger subject, and we want the ability source, which is, there we go. Okay, and there we go. I think this should be good now. All right, save that again, save this again, and all right, let's see if we got this time. I think this should give us a much nicer. You should give this tool its own name instead of using your studio name for it, especially if you plan to have the tool out for the public. Well, again, I don't have any necessary plans yet. It's sort of like a aspirational. I think I would love to have it released for the public once I've got the game done because, again, I like to give back to all those who helped me, and having access to a tool like this would certainly be of great help. All right. That looked much nicer, and they all got damage at the same time too. I like that. There we go. That's much better. All right, let's see if it burns the trees down correctly. Oh, that was weird. It burned the tree twice. That's weird. I guess it makes sense. The tree wouldn't have much to hold on to. I guess I'm okay with that. Sometimes things work in ways I don't expect, and it's okay. Yeah, I can actually hear it burning the tree twice. The fire just eradicates the tree. That's kind of fun. I'm cool with that. Is everybody else cool with the way that tree burns down? I think that's okay. That's weird. I'm not sure why it takes damage twice. It's almost like the tile taking damage is somehow. Yeah, they didn't take damage twice, so I'm really confused as to why the tree burned twice, but honestly, that's okay. Yeah, that looks pretty good though. Burn! Burn! Pretty sweet. All right, that's pretty sweet. Okay, I'm happy with the way that looks. All right, now let's make sure this works. They should take damage at the start of their turn. They did, good. Oh, honey, why'd you stay in the fire? You're gonna burn some more. Hood. All right, that's looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that wall of fire. All right, so now I think we just need to add the final trigger, which is to make it so the wall of fire goes away after 2 rounds, so it doesn't last forever, because that might just be a little crazy. Okay. All right, so I'm happy with that's fixed. Okay. All right, so we have this last task of wall of fire should burn out, go away after 2 rounds. All right, so we're going to add some round tracking to make it so that the wall of fire goes away, and then it should be all set to go. Um, I'm also trying to think if there's any other considerations. I think Green had suggested maybe not being able to place on characters that are already standing there so that you can't just set them on fire initially. That might be a good point. I don't know if it's necessarily OP. Maybe the damage needs to change. Because 2 damage, so you would get 4 damage in total over 2 rounds, which is not bad considering a fireball costs 3 and does the same amount of damage. So it's right now it's on par with the fireball in terms of the amount of damage. So balance-wise, it's not too bad. It's consistent with our other spells. Another thought I had was maybe that instead of taking fire damage at the start of turn, they take the fire damage at the end of their turn so that there's a chance they could walk out of the fire and not take additional damage. So that's another possibility as well. What does this card exactly say? Take 2 damage when entering or beginning turn on fire tile. All right, let's just let's add that 2 rounds thing. Finish it off, and then we can discuss a little more. All right, spells, wall of fire. Okay, so 2 rounds. So a round would be a back and forth between the players. So I want it to last. I'm trying to think of how we're going to do that. All right. So we know it's going to be a trigger effect. We need to add to it. So let's copy that one. Edit. Okay, and we don't want this. Okay, so fire tile countdown on start turn. Okay, so 2 rounds means it's going to last for 2 turns since the time I cast it. So we know we're going to want to track a counter on the start of turn. All right. All right, let's remove all these conditions again. Actually, you know what? Let's see. Let's think about the conditions we need. This tool is extremely good for saving time. Oh, yeah. And the great thing about it, like I said, is that assuming I had everyone on the same client version, I would actually be able to push the DLC directly at the end of the stream. The last few times I did content development, I was actually delivering these cards after the stream so people could play them right after we done making them, which is cool. Since you can just select all the stuff instead of coding it from scratch. Yeah, absolutely. It's nice too to know that things will work. To be able to that you could any existing abilities you've created can always be pulled into characters, and you've got that nice modular encapsulation to it so that you know things are going to work. All right, so I want to create a countdown to track to remove this thing at the end of the 2 rounds. So I'm trying to think about how we best go about doing this. So on the start of the turn, all right, we're going to target the ability source. The condition is going to be, okay, we want to look at the event activator. Trigger subject, event activator, which is the player that started the turn. So we're going to look at that. The event activator is equal to the source, event source. Sorry, no, it's the ability source. Trigger subject, ability source. I'm probably not doing a good enough job explaining this for the new folks, but when I map these things together, everything in the game that happens fires events, right? So when a turn starts, it fires a start turn event. And then we can then have an action happen that does something with a specific target. So everything has got a series of mappings to it, and each event's a little different about what it maps to. So what I've done is create these cheat sheets here so I can look and determine as I change the event types. You see, notice when I change these, it changes everything here to different mappings. So I can figure out what the things map to. So in this case, the player event is going to store just the player that started in the turn, and then it doesn't really have any other information. So it basically says player and whoever it was started their turn. I don't necessarily have access to any other information. But I do have built-in information with the ability itself that is always consistent. So for example, in this case, the ability source is the actual object that contains a triggered ability. So in this case, the status effect, which is the one containing the wall of fire, is the ability source. And so that's why I look at this. All right. Now, without any conditions, when this event fires, it will just activate whenever any turn starts. But we don't want it to just happen when any turn starts. We want this to happen after 1 round's completed. So 1 round would mean that it's gone back to my turn since having cast the spell. So if there were multiple players in there, let's say we had a 4-player game, and you pass turn a bunch of times, the turn that matters is it's gone back to my turn. That means the whole round's been completed. So what I'm doing here is adding a condition for the event activator, which in this case is the player, okay? And then we want to say, I guess property player ID we're going to use, okay, is equal to the ability source, which is the fire itself, player ID. So the player that created it, it'll be associated to the player that created it, so it'll have the same ID. Okay. All right, so now this event will only fire on the person who casts its turn. Okay, and then what we want to do here is then decrement a round counter so that we can then, after the round's completed, um, put the fire out. All right, so I'm trying to think about how I want to store that property. That's what I'm kind of thinking about in my head right now. So, okay, let's think here. All right, so we're gonna have to create a new property. Let's save this decrement round. Okay, I'm gonna call this decrement round on start turn. Okay, let's save this as is. Okay, I'm gonna create a new trait to keep like a new, basically a new pointer. Now, normally I had been creating all my traits in this global list, and I realized that this was also creating a scalability issue where this is becoming way too verbose. There's not a reason to have global access to traits that are only specific to a particular ability. So I had the ability to create a dynamic trait, which we're going to do here, and we're just going to call this trait fire round. I don't know, like just a round for something that a property to track that the fire has completed a round. Okay, and then we're going to hit save, and now that's got a nested trait called fire round. And the cool thing about it is since everything will scale based on the amplitude we pass in, and right now everything's set to 1, but remember we're passing in a 2 when we create the effect, so it does 2 damage, it will last 2 rounds, it's all 2s, so it's nice and easy. So we're going to use fire round and just leave it at 1, which will automatically put it at 2. Okay. All right, so it's going to start at two rounds. All right. Now we're going to go back into here, and for our action effect, at the start of our turn, what we're going to do is say, actually, I just realized I don't have a property to do this. I'm going to have to edit it. I don't have a way to subtract a dynamic property because I have set trait, but I don't have subtract trait. All right. We're going to go ahead and edit the editor before we can continue. So before I do that, let's just save this where it's at. And let's save this where it's at. And let's save the spell where it's at as well. Okay, and then I'm going to close this down, and then I'm going to edit the underlying definition. So this will probably be of interest to Green if he's still watching, because kind of an inside look at how our thing's working. So this is the actual definitions file, is this this guy here. It's all just stored into a simple database. And what I need to do is edit and create a new type of effect in here to map it that way. Green is still watching. Okay, good. All right, conditions, subject, property, target. No, it's action effects is what I need to change. Here we go. Browse data, type action effects. So this is one of the ways I map logic back to the game. These are mapping to hard-coded types in the game logic. But what we need to do is add another type of a thing here. So we need to do set trait dynamic. Good. We're going to make a new record. Set subtract from trait dynamic. And then this is going to be just copying attribute value, string, and 2. Okay. So there is that one. Let me just make sure that's consistent with our subtract from trait. Subtract from attribute. Yeah, let's organize this by label. Maybe Lizard see it. Oh, I have to do subtract from attribute value. There we go. Okay, so there we go. So now I've got the ability to subtract from trait. I guess I can just call it subtract trait. There we go. It's a little less wordy. All right, right changes. All right, and now the editor has been edited. Okay, so now we can go back into the editor and we've got the new dropdown we need. So now those will appear in our dropdown. All right, so go back to spells, wall of fire, Yeah, adding that search feature is on my list, and I can't wait for that because it's going to make this even faster to develop stuff. Edit. Okay, so what we called this was fire round. Okay, so edit, action effects. Okay, so now we want subtract from trait. There we go. Fire round. And I want this to be a fixed number so it doesn't get affected by the amplitude of 1. So at the start of my turn, I'm going to subtract the fire round by 1. Okay, great. Okay, and now we need to have a final trigger to remove this thing once it's reached fire round 0. Okay, so what I'm going to do is now create a, let's copy this one. Okay, and then put out fire after 2 rounds. All right, so say on. Maybe you should focus on making the search feature as soon as possible since it's such an important feature. It's worth using game dev time to make it since you'll definitely regain time having it. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it's on my priority list for this release, so it will get done. That will be a massive help. And the cool thing is I've already built one. The actual game itself has a search engine. In fact, you know what? I'm going to show you that real quick too because I don't think I'm not sure if you guys have seen the actual game, but this is the actual game that loads. And I can show you how some of the search features work in here. This is really cool. I want to basically build the same search engine for my definitions so we can do it. It looks like I was in the middle of testing a game. Yeah. Debug test options. Let's turn this off. I don't think my game sounds are working, but there is music and stuff like that. I'm gonna have to buy the game. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I would appreciate it. Definitely won't have a better experience with the game. I said it's probably the best $30 you can spend because of our commitment to the players and how involved we are with shaping this thing. All right, so here's an example of my search engine here. So I'm hoping to build something like this. This is all of our cards in the game, and so there's a lot. Uh, Not all of them are implemented yet, so the ones that are shaded are still being developed, but all the colored ones are. And what's cool about this, so I want to basically create like anything I can search for here is like, let's search for dragons, right? And then it'll find all the dragon cards. Well, specifically with the S, so there we go, dragon. Now it's finding all the dragons. There you go, so that's pretty cool. And it's got the word dragon, it comes up. So I want to basically create the same kind of effect within the actual definitions thing where I can just type and it finds whatever I'm looking for. And I can even do cool things like if I want to find everything that's got a certain type of thing, like show me all the things that have skeleton on them, hashtag skeleton, and it'll find all the skeleton types, which is cool. Yeah. Yeah, this is our deck builder. So you can actually build your own custom decks here. And I gotta turn my sort filter off. Doop. There we go. So this is how you make the decks. You pick your summoner, you drop them in place, and you can pick your teammates, and based on who you chose, it activates whatever colors they have. So he can pick Void and Arcane characters, and so he's got there's characters, and you can build your decks. There's all kinds of cool things. And then once you have your deck, you can then set your deck at the team, at the campfire, and go to battle and stuff like that. So this is kind of how the game looks so far. This is the main menu. It's all designed to be very much um, immersive experience rather than having lots of like panes and menus. I try to avoid that, make it more immersed in the world. All right. So we were just in the process of putting the last thing. Put out fire on. I'll just call it put out fire. It's not super important the name is. But what we need to do here is now say at the start of turn, we're going to use a different. We're going to use start of turn complete, which fires after the start turn event. And then what we're going to do here is, yeah, he says it looks really nice. Thank you. We do want this at the start of the player's turn who's completed it. Yep. And then we want to do here is add a new condition for if the trigger subject ability source trait dynamic, and we call that fire round, I think. Yep. Fire round. Oops. Is Now I'm trying to think of what we want this to be at. Less than or equal to number. Okay, now here's where I have to think. After the first turn, it will go down from 2 to 1. And then it will go down to, yeah, so 0 is the correct number. That should be 2 full rounds. Okay. All right. And now the effect we want to have here is going to be remove status effect. And that's going to be on the ability source. So that's the target. This should just be assigned. And status effect is the type. Okay. Yep. I don't need any traits on this thing. And do we want to have a sound effect for when it happens? I don't know that it needs one. I guess it can make the fire sound one more time. Okay. All right. So decrement and start turn. We definitely don't need this here. And this should be status effect assigned. And this does not need to be cast or that. Okay. I think that should do it. Let's go ahead and save it and see what happens. But that should make the firewall last for 2 rounds. So we'll go ahead and test it out and see if it lasts 2 rounds. And then if that's the case, I think we're done. We will have successfully made our Wall of Fire spell, which I'm excited about. Okay, there we go. All right. Burn! That's pretty funny. All right, so end turn. Okay, so that was 1 round. All right. Now let's go ahead and look at the log and make sure that it is, in fact, triggering that turn start thing that we wanted to see. All right, so I'm looking for turn has started. All right, so I didn't see the I don't see the trigger event firing for that fire. It should have said triggered, and then we should have seen a All right, so I don't think the wall of fire is going to go out. We'll test it though. I don't think it's going to work because we should have seen that trigger happen. And this is also very strange. I'm seeing this like lag happening in the AI, which is nonsensical here. This shouldn't be causing such a delay. So there's something going on here I'm going to have to look into later. Very strange. Oh, it did go out. It did work. Ah, there it is. Ah, 2 rounds. All right, I guess I must have just missed it in the log. All right, cool. So the fire has been put out. There you go. 2 rounds of firewall. We did it. We made the spell. Yes. I'm so excited. That's awesome. All right. So, yeah, today was a fun day. We got to meet a lot of new folks. I'm so appreciative for all the new folks that came by, as well as our existing fans. Thanks, Jimmy and Mooney and Green and Pitbox. It's so great to have you guys all here on the stream, and everyone else who's kind of lurking there. Thank you for being here with us. Very appreciative. So today we kind of got to recover our triumph from our failure from last week by getting the nested definitions working. And then we got to use those new abilities to build a new spell for the firewall with a new structure, and everything's all self-contained, the card. So I'm really happy about that. We got all the triggers working, so firewall now works as anticipated. So I will add that to the roster for the upcoming release, and we'll have that in the next client update, which will be coming out soon, hopefully. Once I get the last few issues finalized, I'll be putting that out, and then going forward week to week, I'll be releasing new content as always. So be sure to come back again and give me your insights and opinions and ideas. I'd love to incorporate that into the work. Thank you guys all for being here. It's been a great stream, and I look forward to doing this again with you guys next week. I'm also on the Discord as much as I can be, and I try to be as accessible as I can. So if you got any additional follow-up or questions, please be sure to join us there. If you're not a fan of Discord, we also have our community forums, which is great. You can access those on the website, and you do not need to have access to the game to create a forums account. So you can register here and post messages or ideas, and I will read those there as well. Yeah, so there is everything resource-wise. Thanks again, everybody, for joining me. I appreciate having you along with us on our journey here, and I will see you guys again Next week. Oh, real quick. KenKen101 asks, how much does the game cost? Our pre-release costs $29.99, and that comes with access to all of our current content as well as the full game on release. So what's great about that is, unlike other CCG games where you pay hundreds of dollars every month to try and collect all the cards, you get access to all the cards. So it comes with our full launch set of cards. It also comes with access to all platforms. So whether you like to play on PC, Mac, or mobile, the game will be available to you on all platforms for our pre-release. Awesome. Chenko here. That's Ken Ken. Awesome. Great. Yeah. So excited to get so much activity. Again, thank you guys so much. I've loved the conversation. I love the questions. Love the interaction. It makes me so happy to have that kind of activity here on the stream. It really means a lot. Yeah. So I hope to see you in our Discord and our forums. And again, I'll be here next week to do this again. So I look forward to seeing you then. Thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate it. All right. Did that work? End the stream. I think I'm still streaming. Where did this guy go? There it is. Stop streaming.